My name is Elias Whittaker, and I was born into a family that has lived in the Appalachian Mountains for longer than anyone can clearly trace. If you open the brittle family Bible tucked inside our cedar chest, the records stretch back to the early 1800s, though the pages yellow and crack before you reach the first name. My grandfather used to say the Whittakers didn't come to these mountains. The mountains swallowed us whole and refused to spit us back out. That may sound like old-fashioned talk, but if you lived where we live, you would understand how much truth lingers in words spoken half in jest. The Appalachians are not just hills and trees. They are alive in ways I have never seen written down in books outsiders bring to explain us. And for generations, my family has survived here by following rules that outsiders would call strange. We do not break them. Not once. Not ever. Because the mountains remember when you do. I grew up in a small house that sat near the edge of a ridge, surrounded by dense forest that kept the sun caught in its branches most of the day. My father, Jonathan Whittaker, was a stern man with a voice that carried like a bell. He worked the land, hunted, and raised me with the same firm hand that his father had used on him. My mother, Ruth, was quiet, with eyes that never seemed surprised. She always looked as though she already knew what was coming, whether it was a storm or the first cry of a newborn calf. She believed the rules more than anyone. She treated them not as old superstitions, but as laws stronger than any sheriff's decree. The first time I was old enough to hear the rules spoken clearly, I was 7 years old. That morning, my father gathered me by the hearth, his broad hand pressing down on my shoulder to hold me steady, and recited them in the same order his father had taught him. He made me repeat each one until I could say it without stuttering. There were 10 in total. They were not written anywhere, because paper could burn and ink could fade. The rules, he said, were to be carved into my mind as if into stone. Rule 1. When you hear your name called in the woods at night, do not answer. Rule 2. Never whistle after dark. Rule 3. If you find a door standing in the forest with no house around it, do not open it. Do not touch it. Do not look too long. Rule 4. When the wind dies and the forest goes silent, come inside immediately. Bolt the door. Rule 5. If you wake to find the trees closer than they were when you slept, do not go outside until daylight. Rule 6. Do not follow lights that move without source. Rule 7. If you see an animal watching you with 2 human eyes, do not acknowledge it. Walk away and do not return. Rule 8. When you kill game, leave a portion behind. The mountains always take their share. Rule 9. Do not cross running water when the moon is red. Rule 10. Never, under any circumstance, forget the other 9. At 7 years old, I repeated them with a child's obedience, not truly understanding the weight behind them. But later that night, when the forest seemed to lean against the windows and the trees knocked their long fingers on the glass, I lay awake and whispered the rules to myself until sleep finally carried me away. My family lived simply, but the mountains made every simple thing heavy. We farm-hunted and traded with the small town a valley away. Outsiders sometimes came through, hikers, drifters, or curious folk wanting to see real mountain living. Most didn't stay long. Some vanished on trails that were supposed to loop back, but never did. My father always shook his head when the sheriff or rescue teams went looking. If they broke the rules, there ain't no finding them, he'd mutter. The mountains got them now. When I was 10, I learned the rules weren't just threats meant to keep children in line. That summer, my cousin Samuel came up from Knoxville to visit. He was 2 years older than me, proud and reckless. His father had left the mountains as soon as he could and raised Samuel in the city, where he grew up thinking rules like ours were foolish superstition. He laughed when my mother reminded him not to whistle at night. He said only birds cared about whistling. My father warned him once, then twice, his voice carrying that sharp edge of finality that meant no more warnings would follow. But Samuel never liked being told what not to do. And so one night, while we lay awake on the porch listening to cicadas buzz in waves, he puckered his lips and let out a long, low whistle into the trees. The sound cut through the summer night like a knife. The insects stopped. The frogs went quiet. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. My father was through the door in less than a heartbeat, his hand gripping Samuel's shoulder, so hard I thought he'd leave a permanent bruise. He didn't shout. He didn't scold. He only said, "Inside." Now, we obeyed, though Samuel grumbled. My mother barred the door, every latch and lock drawn, and pulled the curtains tight. Then the waiting began. Silence pressed against the house. My father took his rifle from the mantel and sat by the window. He didn't move for hours, except to glance at me and Samuel with eyes that ordered us to stay put. I drifted to sleep against my mother's lap, but in the early hours, something woke me. Not a sound. There was none, but the feeling of being watched. I turned toward the window. In the sliver of space between the curtains, I saw shapes moving in the yard. Tall, too tall to be men, thin as poles, their limbs bending wrong as they walked. They circled the house, slow and deliberate, and each time one passed the window, I felt a pull in my chest, like the urge to answer a question I hadn't heard. My father never moved, though I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. He knew better than to shoot. You cannot shoot the mountain's children. You can only wait for dawn to drive them back. Samuel never whistled again. He left the next morning, pale and shaky, and never visited after that. I never asked him what he saw that night, though sometimes I wonder if it was the same as what I did. But in truth, I didn't need his answer. I had learned mine. The rules were not warnings, they were survival. As the years passed, the rules guided everything we did. If the woods called my name, I pulled the blanket over my head and held my breath. If I hunted deer, I always left a portion by the stump at the edge of the clearing. If I saw a door freestanding in the pines, its wood warped and handle gleaming with no house around it, I kept my eyes low and walked faster, pretending I hadn't noticed. I never crossed running water on nights when the moon burned red like rust. And when the silence came, that heavy, absolute silence where even your own breathing sounded too loud, I dropped whatever I was doing and went inside, no matter the time of day. Still, knowing the rules didn't mean I always understood them. My father said they were older than memory, passed down from when the first settlers realized the mountains were not empty. He claimed they had been taught by whispers and signs, a bargain struck between human stubbornness and the hunger of the land. "You can't beat the mountain," he said once as we chopped wood, "but you can make it let you live if you pay respect. Break the rules, though, and it'll take back what it gave." When I was 16, I thought I was ready to challenge those words. Teenagers are fools that way. I'd grown tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having truly lost anything. My friends in town whispered about spirits and old tales, but they also rolled their eyes at our rules, saying no one had seen proof in years. They said the Whitakers were just stubborn hill folk, clinging to stories to scare children. For the first time, I let doubt take root. And that summer I learned why doubt in the mountains is more dangerous than any wild animal. It was August when I decided to test a rule. I told myself I would only bend it, not break it. I wanted to prove to myself, and maybe to my father, that I wasn't just a child parroting words. The rule I chose was Rule 6. Do not follow lights that move without source. It seemed the easiest to mock. Everyone had seen fireflies dart through the trees. Everyone had seen lanterns carried by hunters. Why should I believe that a moving light meant danger? I told myself I would follow one, just long enough to see who or what carried it. Then I would return, satisfied that I had faced the mountain and come back whole. The night I chose was muggy, the air thick and damp. I left the house after my parents fell asleep, carrying only a small knife and the stubbornness of youth. The forest felt restless, branches twitching though the air was still. Then I saw it, a pale glow weaving between the trees. Not the quick blink of fireflies, not the steady beam of a lantern. It pulsed slow, like a heartbeat, drifting deeper into the woods. My own heart pounded as I stepped after it. I told myself I would only go a few paces. But the light drew me on, always just far enough to keep me chasing. My feet carried me down slopes I didn't recognize, across stones slick with moss, past trees I could not name. The light stayed ahead, pulsing steady. When I tried to stop, my chest tightened, the same pull I had felt that night Samuel whistled. It urged me forward, whispering without sound. I do not know how long I walk. Time in the mountains has a way of bending when you stray from the rules. But when the glow finally paused, I found myself in a clearing I had never seen before, though our family had walked these woods for generations. The grass was too green, shimmering faintly even in the dark, and in the center stood a door. It was freestanding, no frame, no house, no wall, just a wooden door, tall and old, its handle wrought iron and cold in the moonlight. And I realized then, with a sick twist in my gut, that I had broken two rules at once. I stood there frozen, the pale glow pulsing behind me, and the door looming ahead. My father's voice echoed in my mind, stern and unyielding. If you find a door standing in the forest with no house around it, do not open it. Do not touch it. Do not look too long. And here I was, having followed a light I should have ignored, standing before exactly what I had been warned about since I was a child. My breath grew shallow. The forest around me was wrong, too quiet, too still, the air heavy as if holding its lungs. Even the bugs, which never stopped their summer drone, had fallen silent. The glow that had lured me there flickered once more, then vanished. I was left in the clearing alone, with only the door between me and the unknown. Its surface was carved with deep lines, almost like veins, and the longer I stared, the more it seemed they shifted, rearranging into shapes I nearly recognized before they slid away. A pattern formed and dissolved again, like something breathing beneath the wood. My hand twitched at my side, wanting to reach for the handle. A voice in the back of my skull told me it would be easy, that I had already come this far, that there was no harm in just a glance inside. But then another memory cut through, my cousin Samuel's pale face, after that night of whistling, his eyes hollow, his hands trembling even when he gripped the railing of our porch. He had never spoken of what he saw, but his silence was its own warning. And I thought of my mother, who barred the windows with shaking hands, who whispered prayers while my father sat steady with his rifle, daring the night to try him. The rules weren't made for convenience. They were made for survival. I stumbled backward, tearing my gaze away from the door, forcing myself not to look at it again. My chest hurt from holding my breath, and every instinct screamed at me to run. But the forest wasn't the same as it had been when I entered. The trees bent in unfamiliar ways, crowding close, their trunks so tight together I could barely see a path. I turned in circles, and no direction seemed right. The clearing pressed in, and though I kept my eyes from the door, I felt it looming behind me, waiting for me to falter. I chose a direction at random and forced my legs to move, pushing through branches that clawed at my skin. My knife, useless against what lurked here, was clenched in my hand like a charm. The woods groaned with sounds that didn't belong, creaks and low sighs. like the forest itself was watching me leave. Each step seemed to echo, though I was moving across damp earth. And once, faintly, I thought I heard my name whispered from behind, carried on a breath of air that touched my neck. I ran. I didn't care if I made noise. I ran until my lungs burned and the world tilted with dizziness. The trees stretched in endless lines, each one identical to the last, each shadow bending in unnatural angles. I no longer knew if I was moving toward home or deeper into something else entirely. Just when panic threatened to break me, the silence cracked. Somewhere ahead, the cicadas started again, their rhythmic buzz a lifeline pulling me out of that heavy stillness. I stumbled toward the sound, clawing my way through brush, until I spilled onto a path I recognized. It was the trail near our old hunting ground, a half-mile from our house. Relief hit so hard I nearly sobbed. I forced myself to slow, to breathe, to listen. The night sounds were back, honest and familiar. Still, I didn't stop moving until I saw the glow of our lantern in the window. I crept inside and barred the door, my chest heaving, sweat soaking my shirt. My father was awake, sitting in his chair like he always did when something was wrong. His eyes met mine, and he didn't need to ask where I had been. He saw it on me, the fear, the wrongness, the stain of breaking rules. He rose, slow and heavy, and set his hand on my shoulder. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his voice came low and steady. "You went after it." I couldn't answer. My throat locked up, words strangled in shame. "You saw the door." His tone was not questioning, it was fact. I nodded. My father closed his eyes, breathing deep like the weight of generations pressed harder onto his chest. When he opened them, there was no anger. Only the grim certainty of a man who had seen this before. "You're alive," he said at last. "That's more than most who break two rules can say. You listen now, Elias. You do not speak of what you saw. You do not look for it again. The mountain doesn't forgive twice." I wanted to ask questions. What would have happened if I had opened the door? Why it had appeared to me? Why the lights come at all? But the words stuck. Deep down, I knew answers wouldn't save me. Only obedience would. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that something followed me. At night, I dreamed of the clearing, of the door, of hands pressing against the wood from the other side. Sometimes, in the early hours, I swore I saw a glow moving between the trees beyond my window. But I never followed it again. I shut my eyes and repeated the rules until exhaustion dragged me back to sleep. Life moved on in its quiet rhythm. My father worked the land. My mother tended the garden and stitched torn clothes. I hunted, chopped wood, traded with town. The ordinary and the strange existed side by side, as they always had. But a seed of unease grew in me. I realized the rules weren't just for protection. They were a bargain. We lived in the mountains, and in return, the mountains let us live. Break the pact, and the balance tipped. That truth sank deeper the winter I turned 17. Snow came early that year, heavy and sharp. Our crops had yielded poorly, and hunting grew scarce. Hunger pressed against our walls. One evening, my father and I tracked a buck across the ridges for hours. When I finally brought it down with a clean shot, relief surged through me. It would feed us for weeks. But as we dressed the carcass, my father reminded me of Rule 8. When you kill game, leave a portion behind. The mountains always take their share. We carved a hindquarter and left it by a stone outcropping, as tradition demanded. I remember staring at the meat lying in the snow, steam rising from it, feeling the raw weight of what we were giving up. Hunger clawed at my gut, but my father's steady gaze left no room for protest. We trudged home with what remained, cold biting our skin, the mountains watching. That night, scratching echoed on the walls of our house. Long, deliberate strokes, as though claws traced the wood. My father sat with his rifle again, his eyes hard. He told us to stay inside no matter what. Through the window's crack, I glimpsed shapes in the snow, broad-shouldered, moving on four legs, but taller than any wolf should be. Their eyes gleamed faintly, too intelligent, fixed on the house. They circled, sniffing, waiting. My mother whispered that they came to see if we had honored the rule. I pressed close to her, every hair on my body standing on end. When dawn broke, they were gone. In their place, deep prints marred the snow, wider than my hand, leading back into the woods. My father opened the door, his jaw set tight. "The share was enough," he said, almost to himself. I realized then how thin the line was between living and vanishing. Our survival didn't depend on our rifles or our gardens. It depended on respect and fear. But fear has a way of twisting as you grow. For a long time, it kept me in line. And then, slowly, it started to gnaw at me, to make me restless. I thought of those who had vanished. Hikers, hunters, even family. I wondered if they had found doors. If they had answered voices. If they had dared to question the pact. And though I told myself I would never break another rule, doubt simmered like an ember, waiting for air. It found me again the spring I turned 18. The forest had just begun to green, wildflowers pushing through damp earth. I was returning from town with supplies when I noticed the trees seemed different. Thicker, somehow, as though they had crept closer to the path since I had walked it that morning. At first, I thought it was fatigue. But then I remembered Rule 5. If you wake to find the trees closer than they were when you slept, do not go outside until daylight. But I hadn't been sleeping. I was wide awake, standing on a path that should have been open, now tightening like a noose. My heart thudded, and I quickened my pace. The trees leaned in, shadows swallowing the trail, the air stifling. Branches brushed against my arms, though I stayed in the center. And faintly, behind me, I heard footsteps. Perfectly matched to mine. I didn't dare look back. I only ran, supplies clattering on my shoulders, until the trees thinned and the valley opened before me. When I burst into the yard of our home, breath ragged, my father was already outside, his face pale beneath his weathered skin. He looked past me, toward the trail, and muttered words I couldn't catch. Then he grabbed me by the arm, hauled me inside, and barred the door. That night, silence fell heavy again. Too heavy, and when the silence comes, you do not test it. You hide, and you wait. That night, when the silence fell, it pressed against our house like a weight too heavy to bear. Even the crackle of the fire seemed swallowed before it could reach our ears. My mother held her hands in her lap, knuckles white, lips moving in prayers I couldn't quite hear. My father sat with his rifle again, though he never once pointed it toward the window. He always said bullets didn't matter when the mountain wanted something. The only weapon worth holding was obedience. I tried to stay calm, but the longer the silence stretched, the louder my own heartbeat became, until it sounded like a drum the whole forest must hear. Then the knocking started. It wasn't on the door, but along the walls, slow and deliberate, circling the house like a hand dragging along the wood. Every few seconds, the knock shifted higher, lower, always moving. I stared at the ceiling, forcing myself not to cry. My father's voice came low. "Don't move. Don't speak. Don't answer." The knocking stopped at the window beside me. I couldn't help it. I looked. What I saw still twists my stomach to remember. A face hovered there, inches from the glass. Not human, but not animal either. Its eyes were wide, dark, and bottomless, but within them moved faint sparks of light, shifting like distant lanterns. Its mouth curved too far, stretching into something that might have been a smile. The glass fogged with its breath, though the air outside was too cold for fog. I froze, praying it hadn't seen me, but then it spoke. My own voice came from its mouth. "Elias, Let me in. Every muscle in my body locked. It was perfect, my tone, my cadence, the way I said my own name. My father's eyes snapped toward me, hard and warning. I wanted to answer, to scream, to deny that it was me, but the rule burned in my skull. When you hear your name called in the woods at night, do not answer. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood, my jaw shaking. The thing's face pressed harder against the glass, warping, stretching. It whispered my name again and again, each time a little less like me, until the last was guttural. Like the mountain itself was trying to shape my syllables through stone. Then it drifted away, and the knocking resumed, slower now, heavier, circling until the silence swallowed it once more. We didn't sleep. We didn't move. Only when dawn finally came, pale light filtering through the curtains, did my father lower the rifle. His shoulders sagged, and he looked 10 years older. "It knows you now," he said. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. The days that followed blurred together. Work had to be done, animals fed, wood chopped, water fetched. But every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me, watching from between the trees. Sometimes I thought I heard faint whispers, my name, my footsteps, even my laugh, echoing in places I hadn't spoken. Once, as I filled a bucket at the creek, ripples moved against the current, spelling letters in the water ELS. I dropped the bucket and ran. I wanted to believe it was my imagination. That fear was twisting everything into shadows. But my mother's face told me otherwise. She watched me too closely, like she expected me to vanish. She left extra offerings at the stump in the clearing. Bread, apples, even a jar of honey once. My father didn't stop her. He only muttered that it wouldn't matter, not now. One night, as I lay half awake, I heard footsteps in the yard. Not circling this time, but pacing back and forth, back and forth. Then a voice called out, soft but clear. "It's me. Elias, I'm cold. Let me in." My blood froze. It was my voice again, but I was inside, breathing shallow beneath the quilt, staring at the dark ceiling. My father rose and barred the door with his own body, pressing his weight against it, as though he expected it to burst open. My mother clutched the cross at her neck, whispering prayers faster than I could understand. The voice outside continued steady, calm, patient. "I'm cold. I'm hungry. Open the door. Please. You know me. I'm you." I don't know how long it went on. Hours, maybe. The voice never grew angry, never shouted. It was worse that way, gentle, coaxing, familiar. When the sun finally rose, silence returned. We opened the door to find the yard untouched, no prints in the frost, no sign of anyone at all. I thought that would be the end of it. But the mountain doesn't let go once it takes interest. The rules keep you alive, but once you've brushed too close, you're marked. That's what I came to understand, and I had brushed too close twice. Following lights, staring at the door. A week later, I went to town for flour and salt. On the way back, I noticed the trees leaning again, crowding the path. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep walking. Then I heard it. Footsteps behind me, matching mine exactly. Every crunch of my boot echoed with another. I stopped, the echo stopped. I turned, heart hammering. Nothing. I told myself not to look again. I told myself to keep walking. But I did look once more, and what I saw was worse than footsteps. There, not 20 paces back, stood me. My own face, my own clothes, my own sack of supplies slung over its shoulder. It smiled faintly when our eyes met, and then it raised its hand and waved. I dropped the sack and ran. Branches whipped my face. Roots caught my feet, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back again. When I finally reached home, chest burning, I slammed the door and locked it. My father demanded to know what I had seen, but I couldn't speak. I only shook my head, gasping like a drowning man. That night, the scratching returned. This time, it wasn't around the house. It was above, On the roof, my father stood with his rifle, staring up at the ceiling, while my mother wept silently into her hands. I pressed myself into the corner, trying to make myself small, invisible. The scratching grew louder, heavier, until dust rained from the rafters. Then came the voice again. Mine. I'm here. I'm inside. But it wasn't. Not yet. The noise lasted until dawn, and then it stopped. My father sat down hard, his face ashen, eyes hollow. He looked at me like a man watching a fire spread across dry woods, powerless to stop it. "You've got its attention," he said. "That's worse than death." I begged him to tell me what it wanted, what I should do, how to make it stop. But he only shook his head. "There's no rule for this. Once it knows your name, once it wears your skin." He didn't finish. For the first time, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Real fear. The days blurred again. I stopped sleeping, afraid of what dreams might come. The mirror in my room grew unbearable. Each time I glanced, I thought the reflection lingered a moment too long. Its smile not quite mine. Once, when I leaned close, I swear its lips moved though mine were still. I covered the mirror with cloth, but that didn't stop the feeling. My father tried to keep me close, sending me only on short tasks, never alone. But the mountain doesn't care for human plans. One evening, while chopping wood by the shed, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, and there I was again, standing in the yard, watching. Its smile was wide, too wide, stretching until the skin cracked. My axe slipped from my hands. The thing tilted its head, and in my voice, it whispered, "Soon." Then it stepped back into the trees, vanishing without sound. I staggered inside, shaking, barely able to speak. My father listened, jaw clenched. "At last," he said, "it's not just the mountain anymore. It's chosen you." I demanded to know what that meant, what it wanted from me, but he wouldn't say. My mother wept again, her prayers spilling faster. I began to understand that some knowledge was too dangerous to carry. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring into the trees, waiting for movement. Around midnight, I saw the glow again. The same pale pulse that had lured me once before. It moved between the trunks, slow, patient, inviting. My body ached to follow, every muscle straining forward. I gripped the chair with white knuckles, forcing myself still. The glow pulsed brighter, then dimmed, then vanished. But a voice remained, drifting through the glass, low and steady. My voice, from the woods. "You can't hide forever, Elias. The rules won't save you now." And I believed it. The days that followed blurred into a kind of waking fever. I moved through them with a hollow chest, as if my heart no longer belonged to me, but to something else that had claimed it. The rules, the old safety net, no longer felt solid. They were like thin threads fraying between my fingers. I kept repeating them under my breath, whispering them while fetching water, while feeding the animals, while lying awake at night. But each time I felt less certain. I had broken too, and then I had been seen. The rules could protect the careful, the obedient. But what protection was there for the marked? My father's face grew older by the day. He barely slept, his eyes sunken, beard unkempt, as though keeping watch for me took every bit of him. My mother avoided my gaze altogether. When I caught her watching me, her eyes were wide and glassy, as if she were not sure which Elias she was looking at, the son she had raised or the thing in the woods that now wore my voice. One evening, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. Their voices were hushed but sharp, slicing through the stillness. "He won't last," my father said. "It's got him." "There must be something," my mother whispered. "There must be a way to bargain." "You don't bargain with it."
You know that?
Her voice cracked. "He's our son." I pressed my back against the wall, the words sinking like stones in my stomach. I wanted to storm in, to demand answers, but I was afraid of what I might hear. afraid they might not be speaking about me at all, but about the other Elias, the one whispering from the trees. That night, the silence returned. Heavy, absolute. We barred the doors and waited, the way we always did. But instead of the scratching or the circling footsteps, a knock sounded at the front door. 3 sharp raps like a polite visitor. My blood turned cold. My father raised the rifle, but his hands shook. Then came my voice. "It's me. Open the door, please." The knock repeated. I forgot the rules. "I'm cold. Let me in." My mother's face crumpled, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she might rise, might rush to the door. I grabbed her arm, whispering desperately, "It's not me. I'm here." She clutched me back, her nails digging into my skin, but her eyes stayed fixed on the door. The voice spoke again, softer now.
"Mama."
"Please, I'm scared." Her breath hitched. Tears streamed down her cheeks. My father barked her name, low and commanding, and she snapped her gaze to him. He shook his head once, firmly. Slowly, she sank back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. The knocking went on for hours. Sometimes it was gentle, sometimes it shook the frame, rattling the hinges. My name spilled from the other side in 100 variations, pleading, laughing, sobbing, furious. I pressed my hands over my ears, rocking in my chair, but still I heard it. I think I'll always hear it. By dawn, it stopped, but something inside me had cracked. The next day I couldn't stand it anymore. The walls felt like a coffin. The silence inside the house pressed heavier than the silence of the woods. Against my father's orders, I stepped outside. He shouted after me, but I didn't turn back. I needed air. I needed to see for myself if the forest still belonged to me, or if it had already taken me. The trees stood tall, indifferent, their leaves whispering with the wind. Birds sang. The creek gurgled in the distance. Ordinary sounds. But beneath them, I felt the wrongness, the faint vibration that told me the mountains had set their eyes on me. I walked to the edge of the yard, staring into the tree line. For a long while, nothing moved. Then, deep between the trunks, I saw a figure. It was me, not moving, not waving this time, just standing watching. Even from that distance, I could see its smile. I turned away, heart slamming against my ribs, and stumbled back inside. My father was waiting, fury in his face. "Do you want to die?" he snapped. I shouted back, the words ripping free before I could stop them. "It already has me!" The silence that followed was worse than any argument. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes hollow. My mother wept again, rocking in her chair. And I realized in that moment that I was no longer just their son. I was a problem they didn't know how to solve. That night, the glow returned. I saw it through the cracks in the curtains, pulsing steadily, closer than before. My father ordered us to stay inside, but I couldn't resist. Something in my chest ached, pulling me toward it. I slipped from my bed, crept to the window, and peered out. The glow hovered at the edge of the yard, shifting gently like it breathed. Then it split, one light became two. Two became four. They drifted apart, weaving between the trees, forming a pattern. My breath caught when I realized what it was. A door. They outlined its shape in the darkness, tall and narrow, the air within them shimmering faintly. My stomach twisted. I backed away, stumbling over the chair, the crash waking my father. He grabbed me, his grip iron, shaking me. "Did you look at it?" I tried to deny it, but the truth was etched on my face. His eyes closed, and for the first time I saw him look defeated. "Then it's too late," he whispered. I begged him to explain, but he only shook his head. My mother clung to me, sobbing, pressing her face against my chest like she could hold me here by force. But her arms felt weak, and her prayers faltered on her lips. The next day, my father took me deep into the woods. He said nothing at first, only walked, his boots crunching against the soil. We reached a clearing I didn't recognize. where an ancient oak split into 3 massive trunks. At its base sat a stone, carved with markings I couldn't read. He told me our family had carried its burden for generations, that once the mountain chose one of us, nothing could change it. The only mercy left was not to fight but to endure. I asked him what that meant, but he didn't answer. He only placed his hand on my shoulder, heavy and trembling. Remember the rules, even now. Especially now. They're all you have left. We returned home in silence. That night, I dreamed of the door again. This time it was not in the clearing, not in the woods. It was inside our house. Standing in the hallway, tall and dark, its iron handle gleaming. I knew better than to touch it. I knew better than to look too long. But still I did, and from the other side my voice whispered. Soon, I woke drenched in sweat, my throat raw as though I had been calling out in my sleep. My mother sat beside me, eyes red from crying. She stroked my hair and whispered, "We'll keep you as long as we can." Her words chilled me more than any dream. The days stretched thin. Each one bled into the next, each night heavier with silence. Sometimes I caught myself speaking without meaning to, muttering my own name, whispering to the trees. My father watched me with suspicion now, his rifle always within reach. My mother clung to me still, but her prayers had changed. They sounded less like pleas for protection and more like preparations for loss. And then, one evening, as the sun bled into the ridges, the glow returned. Not at the edge of the forest, not beyond the creek. It was in the yard. I froze at the window, staring as the light pulsed steadily, brighter than ever before. It was joined by another, then another, until the whole yard shimmered with them. They drifted together, merging, shaping into the outline of a door. Its iron handle gleamed in the twilight, and from behind it, I heard my voice, clear and steady. "Elias, come home." I couldn't move when I saw it. The door standing in the yard, framed in pale light that pulsed like the beat of a heart. My voice drifted from behind it, calm, certain, without the tremble mine carried in my own throat. "Elias, come home." The words sank into me like hooks. I felt them tugging in my chest, pulling me forward. My legs twitched with the urge to obey, to step outside and reach for that handle. It wasn't just temptation. It was compulsion, like thirst after days in the sun. Like the hunger that gnaws at you in the dead of winter. My father's hand clamped down on my shoulder, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Don't you move," he growled, his voice low and fierce. I couldn't answer. My tongue felt swollen, useless. My mother whimpered behind us, clutching her cross so tightly the chain snapped. The door pulsed brighter, the glow seeping into the cracks of our house, painting the walls with shifting shadows. The handle gleamed like an eye-catching firelight. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp raps, not on our door but on that one outside. Each knock echoed in my bones, as if my ribs were hollow wood struck by a hammer. I wanted to scream, to beg my father to shoot, to do anything, but all I could do was stare. The voice came again, gentler this time. "You've been gone too long, Elias. Don't you miss yourself?" My father yanked me backward, dragging me away from the window. He shoved me into the chair by the hearth and stood over me, rifle in hand, eyes blazing with fury and fear. "You do not look again," he ordered. "Do you hear me? You do not listen. It is not you. It never was." But his words couldn't untangle the knot in my chest, because part of me believed it. Part of me thought that maybe I was the imitation, the shadow, the thing pretending to be Elias, while the real one waited behind that door. The knocking went on through the night, sometimes sharp, sometimes soft, always patient. It didn't fade until dawn, when the light broke over the ridges and the yard lay empty once more. No door, no glow, no prints in the grass, only silence, heavy and expectant. My father collapsed into his chair, rifle across his knees. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice ragged. It won't stop now. Not until it takes you. My mother knelt beside me, her hands trembling as she gripped mine. We'll fight it, she whispered. We'll keep you. But her eyes betrayed her. Wet, desperate, shining with the knowledge that promises meant nothing here. The next days felt like a slow unspooling. I tried to work, to carry wood, to mend traps, to live as though nothing had changed. But everywhere I went, I saw glimpses. A figure ducking between trees, a shadow where none should fall, a ripple in water that spelled out my name. Once, in the corner of my eye, I saw myself step from behind the shed, smiling. When I turned, the yard was empty. Sleep abandoned me. Each time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of the door. It followed me now, shifting places. Sometimes in the clearing, sometimes in our hallway, once even at the foot of my bed. Always with the same iron handle, always with the same voice drifting from behind it. Come home. I stopped speaking much. My voice felt foreign in my own ears, too close to the one calling from the dark. My mother hovered over me, her hands fluttering uselessly, her prayers growing hoarse. My father grew harsher, barking orders, snapping when I hesitated, as if keeping me busy might keep me safe. But at night, I heard him pacing the floor, muttering to himself, voice cracked with fear he couldn't show me. Then came the night when the silence fell heavier than ever before. No wind, no insects, no creak of branches. Just a stillness so thick it pressed against my skin. We bolted the doors, shuttered the windows, and gathered by the fire. My father sat with the rifle, my mother clutching her broken cross, me staring at the flames as though they could burn the shadows away. And then the door appeared inside. It stood against the far wall, taller than the ceiling should allow, its frame pressing into the beams, its surface breathing with faint pulses of light. The handle gleamed. My voice drifted from behind it, clear and certain. Elias, you can't hide. You're already mine, my mother screamed. My father raised the rifle, aiming at the door, but his hands shook so violently the barrel wavered. I stood, though I didn't remember moving, my legs carrying me toward it. Each step felt inevitable, like walking into the current of a river too strong to fight. My father roared my name, lunging to grab me, but the floor seemed to stretch between us. The fire dimmed, the walls bent, and all I could see was the handle gleaming inches from my hand. My own voice whispered from the other side, softer now, intimate, like a secret. You've been waiting, haven't you? Let me in. My fingers brushed the iron. A blast shattered the silence. My father's rifle cracked, the sound deafening in the warped room. The door shuddered, the glow flickered, and for the first time, the voice faltered. I stumbled backward, gasping, clutching my ears as the world bent and snapped back. When I blinked, the door was gone. Only smoke from the rifle barrel hung in the air, acrid and heavy. My father lowered the gun, his chest heaving, sweat streaming down his face. You don't touch it, he rasped. Not ever, but I already had. Even that brief brush, that fleeting contact lingered like a burn on my skin. The days after blurred into a fever haze. My mother barely let go of me, hovering, whispering prayers, weeping when she thought I couldn't hear. My father grew harsher still, his voice cracking with desperation. He made me recite the rules again and again, until my throat ached, until the words lost meaning. But I obeyed, clinging to them like a rope dangling above a pit. Still, I knew it was only a matter of time. One morning, as I fetched water from the creek, I caught my reflection in the current. At first it was normal, my own wary face staring back. Then its lips curled into a smile, while mine did not. It whispered, faint but clear, beneath the bubbling water. Tonight, I dropped the bucket and ran. That evening I tried to stay awake, to fight the pull, but exhaustion crushed me. My dreams carried me back to the door, waiting in the clearing, the glow spilling across the ground. My voice drifted from behind it, soft and patient. "It's time, Elias."
Come home.
When I woke, I was no longer in my bed. I was standing barefoot in the yard, the grass damp with dew, the door looming before me. My hand hovered inches from the handle. My father's shout split the night, raw and furious. "Elias!" I snapped awake fully, stumbling back, heart racing. My father barreled toward me, rifle in hand, eyes wild. He grabbed me, dragging me inside, slamming the door, barring it with trembling hands. My mother sobbed into her hands, rocking back and forth. My father turned to me, his face hollow, his voice breaking. "It won't stop, boy. Not until you go through. The rules kept us alive this long, but they can't keep you from what's claimed you." I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he hadn't told me sooner, why he had let me believe the rules were enough, but no words came. Only the cold certainty that he was right. That night the door knocked until dawn. By the time dawn broke, my body felt hollow, as though the knocking had shaken everything out of me and left only an empty shell. My father hadn't slept. He sat in his chair, rifle across his knees, his eyes rimmed in red. My mother rocked silently in the corner, whispering words too low to hear. I couldn't look at either of them. I stared at my hands instead, watching the faint tremor that never seemed to stop. It didn't feel like fear anymore. It felt like something in me was being pulled, slowly, surely, toward that door. The day passed without speech. We ate in silence, if you could call it eating. My mother pushing bread around her plate, my father swallowing mechanically, me barely able to choke anything down. The air in the house felt tight, heavy with waiting. Each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of wind through the cracks, made us flimple. The mountains were patient. They always had been. But I could feel their patience thinning, like the final stretch of rope before it snaps. When night came, the silence fell thicker than ever. We barred the doors, latched the windows, and gathered around the fire. I repeated the rules to myself, whispering them under my breath like a prayer. But the words felt brittle now, powerless. They were meant to protect those who stayed obedient, who never broke them. I had already failed. The rules weren't ropes strong enough to pull me back. They were only reminders of how far I had strayed. The glow appeared in the yard again, brighter than ever. It seeped through the shutters, washing the room in pale light. My father raised the rifle, but his hands trembled too badly to keep it steady. My mother clutched my arm, tears running silently down her cheeks. Then the knocking began, slow and deliberate. This time it was not just 3 raps. It was steady, unrelenting, like a heartbeat pounding through the wood. My voice drifted from outside, calm and patient. "Elias, it's time." I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The voice was inside my head now, woven into my bones. My mother sobbed harder, rocking me like a child, whispering, "Stay, stay, stay." My father shouted something, words lost in the roar of blood in my ears. The knocking grew louder, the glow brighter, until it felt like the house itself would split in two. And then the door appeared inside again. It rose from the floorboards, taller than the ceiling, its frame bending the walls around it. The handle gleamed in the firelight, casting long, warped shadows across the room. The glow pulsed through its surface, and my voice came from behind it, steady, certain. "Come home." My mother screamed and clutched me tighter. My father raised the rifle and fired. The shot echoed through the house, smoke filling the air, but the door didn't shudder this time. The glow only pulsed brighter, and the voice laughed, a sound that was mine and not mine, rolling like thunder. The rifle fell from my father's hands. His shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. "I can't stop it," he whispered. "Not anymore." I tried to resist. I clung to the chair, to the floorboards, to my mother's arms, but my body betrayed me. My legs moved on their own, pulling me toward the door. My hands trembled as they reached forward. My mother shrieked and held me, but the pull wrenched me free, dragging me step by step closer to the handle. My father shouted my name, his voice raw, but even he didn't move to stop me. Maybe he knew it was useless. Maybe he had seen this before, in another generation, another son claimed by the mountains. The handle was cold when my fingers closed around it. The glow surged, blinding, washing the room in light. My mother's scream tore through the air. My father's voice broke into a sob, and then I pulled. The door swung open. I can't explain what I saw on the other side. Words fail. It wasn't darkness, but it wasn't light. It wasn't a place, but it wasn't void. It was me, standing there smiling, my eyes looking back into mine, my mouth curved in that too wide grin. And behind me, behind him, shadows moved, shapes too tall, too thin, bending wrong as they circled in silence. The mountains themselves seemed to breathe there, alive and endless. My other self stepped forward, reaching out a hand. "You've kept me waiting long enough." I felt myself move, though I didn't command it. My hand lifted, my body leaned. The pull was irresistible, like falling into a river's current. I stumbled across the threshold. The glow swallowed me whole. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard my mother's scream, my father's broken sob. Then even those were gone. I don't remember what happened next in any clear sense. Time bent. Moments stretched and snapped. Sometimes I felt like I was walking, sometimes like I was floating, sometimes like I was standing still while the world moved around me. The other Elias walked beside me, smiling, speaking in a voice that was mine but fuller, richer, more certain. I can't recall his words, only the cadence, steady and inescapable, threading through my mind like roots burrowing into soil. When I woke, or thought I woke, I was back in the mountains. The ridges stretched around me, the forest thick and alive. The air smelled the same, damp and sharp, but the colors were wrong. Too vivid, too sharp, as though the world had been stripped and repainted with hues I wasn't meant to see. The trees leaned in close, their trunks twisted, their branches dripping with something that pulsed faintly like veins. The silence here wasn't heavy, it was absolute. And I wasn't alone. They stood among the trees, the shapes I had glimpsed before, tall and thin, their limbs bending in ways that broke sense. Their eyes glowed faintly, lantern sparks in endless dark. They moved without sound, circling, watching, patient. I knew then what my father had meant. Once the mountain takes interest, there's no turning back. The other Elias smiled wider, his teeth too sharp. "This is home." I wanted to scream, but no sound came. My throat locked, my voice stolen. And then I realized I could still hear a voice. Not as mine, but it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from somewhere else. Faint, muffled, distant. It was coming from the house. I saw it as though through a veil. The old cabin, my mother on her knees by the hearth, my father slumped in his chair, and me, my body, standing in the doorway, calm, steady, whole. My voice spoke with ease, soothing, certain. "It's all right. I'm here." They believed it. They wanted to believe it. And I understood. The thing that had taken me didn't leave emptiness behind. It left a replacement. A shadow that wore my skin, spoke my voice, lived my life. My parents would never know the difference. They would carry on, thinking they had kept me, while I remained here, in this place that was not place, with the others who had been taken. I tried to fight, to scream, to claw my way back, but the mountains held me tight. The rules had always been simple: do not answer, do not whistle, do not touch, do not look. I had broken them one by one, and now I was the cautionary tale, the proof of why the rules existed at all. The others circled closer. their eyes gleaming. The other Elias stood beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, heavy as stone. "Don't fight it," he whispered. "You're part of it now. The mountain remembers." And I knew he was right. The last thing I saw before the glow swallowed me whole was my mother's face, smiling faintly at the thing she thought was her son. And then I was gone.